Hello, and welcome to the Channel of Stories. Dear listeners, before we start the story, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a like and share in the comments where you are from. Thank you. Here we go.
There's something about weddings that feels like a slow-motion disaster when you're not the one walking down the aisle. 3 days before the ceremony, I stepped out of the car and into a dream, or a nightmare. It was hard to tell. The vineyard shimmered in late afternoon light, a ribbon of gold unfurling across rolling hills. The smell of lavender and fermenting grapes hung heavy in the air, like something nostalgic you couldn't quite place. And there she was, Elle, dancing barefoot on the lawn with my mother, holding her skirt in one hand and a glass of champagne in the other. She laughed, loudly, like she didn't care who heard. The kind of laugh that makes people turn their heads. She was wearing white, of course, not the wedding dress, but a loose cotton sundress that somehow made her seem more bridal than any veil could. My stomach flipped. She spotted me from across the field and waved, shouting my name like we were old friends. I smiled. The kind of tight, polite smile you give when your throat feels like it's closing. I walked over, said hello, kissed my mother on the cheek, and did my best not to look at Elle. Because she was his. My older brother. The golden one. The one who always won every trophy, every accolade, every parent's approval. And now Elle. They'd only been dating 6 months when he proposed. At Christmas. In front of the entire family. She cried, and I clapped. Because that's what I was supposed to do. But from the moment I met her, I knew something was wrong. Not with her, exactly, just something. Some part of me lit up when she walked into the room. Not the fun kind. The dangerous kind. The kind that makes your chest hurt because you know you can't have what you want. And I knew. I knew the second our hands brushed over a tray of hors d'oeuvres and she looked up at me, really looked, that we weren't going to make it through the weekend untouched. I didn't know how. I didn't know when. But I felt it in my ribs. In the slow, humming place where intuition lives. That first night, I lay awake in the guest room, listening to laughter drift in from the patio. Her laughter. His too. I imagined her hand in his. Her head on his shoulder. And I hated myself for the jealousy curling in my chest like smoke. Because she wasn't mine. Because I didn't stop it from starting. And because deep down, some stupid part of me was already hoping she'd look at me that way again. The second night of the vineyard weekend felt like a dream soaked in too much wine. The reception dinner had ended in a blur of speeches, and cake, and someone drunkenly trying to salsa with a waiter. The sun had dipped below the hills, and fairy lights flickered in the grapevines, like fireflies strung up for show. Everyone slowly disappeared. My brother had gone off with our cousins for cigars. My parents were dancing like newlyweds near the catering van. Most of the bridesmaids had wandered off in giggling pairs toward their cabins. I'd stayed behind, mostly to breathe. That's when I saw her. Elle was sitting in the grass, barefoot, white dress bunched at her knees, drinking straight from the bottle of wine like it was water. Her hair was half up, half down, a few pins barely holding on. Her mascara had smudged under one eye, not from crying, just from living too hard in too short a day. "You look like a ghost," she said when she saw me. I sat beside her, not close, but not distant either. I wasn't supposed to be alone with her, but somehow it didn't feel like I could leave. The grass was cold beneath my legs. The silence between us louder than the crickets. She passed me the bottle. I hesitated. "I don't bite," she said, then smirked. "Unless I like you." I took a sip. She looked at the stars for a long time, then whispered, "I feel like I'm walking into someone else's life." Everyone keeps telling me how lucky I am, how perfect we look. But I wake up every morning with this voice in my head that says, "Run. I didn't breathe. Then she turned and said, "You see it, don't you? You see I don't belong in this. That I'm pretending." And then, like it was nothing, like it was inevitable, she leaned in and kissed me. Slow, careful, like a secret being handed over in the dark. Her lips were warm. Her hands were trembling. She tasted like wine and wildness. And for a second, I forgot who she was. I forgot who I was. There was just that kiss, and the silence after, heavy like a held breath. She pulled back first. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I had to know." Then she stood, barefoot and blinking, and walked away. Left me sitting there, heart thundering, grass damp beneath me, wine bottle in hand, and the taste of her still on my lips. I woke the next morning in a tangle of sheets and self-recrimination. The sunlight was already crawling through the vineyard blinds, and voices drifted in from the lawn. Music, laughter, the unmistakable buzz of final preparations. Today was the wedding. Her wedding. I splashed cold water on my face and stared at myself in the mirror, half expecting some visible mark to show what had happened. But I looked the same. Tired eyes. Pressed shirt. Lips that still tingled from a kiss I should have stopped. She acted like nothing happened. That morning, she floated around in a silk robe, laughing with the bridesmaids, helping the florist arrange the arch. She smiled for every photo, handed out mimosas, and when she passed me in the hallway, nothing. Not even a pause. Like I was just a person standing near the flowers. I hated her a little for that, and hated myself more for wishing she'd look at me again. The ceremony was outside, under a canopy of wisteria and gauzy ribbons. Rows of chairs, friends and family, cameras flashing. My brother stood at the altar, beaming like a man who had it all. I stood next to him, because that's what I was supposed to do. And then she walked down the aisle. Elle in lace and sunlight, every step measured, every smile practiced. Her eyes scanned the crowd, never once landing on mine. I couldn't breathe. Not when the vows were read. Not when she said, "I do." And not when my brother kissed her and the crowd erupted in applause. I clapped, because that's what I was supposed to do. That night, I sat on the deck alone, watching the vineyard flicker under the lights. I could hear them inside, the laughter, the dancing, the clink of champagne glasses. Someone was singing karaoke. My brother was probably telling the story of how they met for the 100th time. She was probably laughing. Or maybe pretending to. I stayed out there until the music died down. Until my breath stopped catching every time I thought of her lips. Until I convinced myself it was just a moment. Just a mistake. One we would never speak of again. But some mistakes don't end when they're over. Some stay with you. Like the feeling of a kiss you'll never get to finish. After the wedding, everything went quiet. There were no calls. No texts. Not even a thank you note. I left the vineyard the next morning before breakfast, claiming I had an early meeting back in the city. My brother gave me a hungover hug and said, "Thanks for everything, man. You really helped make it perfect." Perfect. The word stuck like a thorn in my chest. Elle stood by the SUV, in a white hoodie and sunglasses, sipping coffee. She didn't say anything as I loaded my bag into the trunk. She just looked past me, like she was studying the hills. I got in. Drove away. Didn't look back. Weeks passed. Then months. I buried myself in work, the kind that made my eyes ache and my hands twitch by midnight. I started seeing someone, a friend of a friend, smart and kind, with a smile that didn't hide anything. We went to dinner. We talked about music. She liked dogs and red wine, and didn't ask too many questions about why I sometimes drifted mid-sentence. But I couldn't stop waiting. I'd open my inbox at 2 a.m. and stare at the screen like it might crack open and give me something I didn't deserve. A message, an explanation, anything. And then, almost a year later, it came. No subject line. No name. Just a single sentence. Do you still think about it? I stared at it for 10 minutes. My hand shook. My brain screamed. I didn't reply. A week later, another. If I had run, would you have come with me? I didn't answer that one either, because I already knew the truth. And it terrified me. The messages didn't stop. They came at strange hours, 3:07 a.m. for 42 p.m., midnight sharp. Always from the same unlisted address. Always short. Always her. I still remember the smell of the grass that night. He tells me I grind my teeth in my sleep. You used to say I whispered. Did it mean anything to you? Be honest. I didn't answer, but I read every one. I started saving them in a folder labeled work. It felt safer that way, like hiding a knife in a drawer marked cutlery. Every message sliced a little deeper. My relationship unraveled. She noticed I flinched when someone touched my shoulder, that I stared too long at nothing. One night, after I'd zoned out watching the rain, she asked gently, "Are you still in love with someone you never had?" I didn't lie. We broke up a week later. I told myself I was doing the right thing, that I was protecting us both. But the truth is, I'd already left her months ago. I just hadn't walked out the door yet. Elle kept writing. She never asked me to meet. Never confessed to my brother. Never mentioned his name at all. Just us. Just the night under the stars, and the kiss that still echoed in my mouth. I dreamed of her. Her hand reaching for mine in a crowd. Her voice in the dark, saying my name like it meant something again. I'd wake up aching, not just for her, but for the version of myself that existed in that one impossible moment. We'd never talked about the vineyard night. But we didn't need to. The silence was filled with everything we never said. It came in a cream envelope, thick and heavy, with my name written in looping handwriting I hadn't seen in nearly 2 years. There was no return address, just a main postmark. The ink had smudged in places like it had been handled too many times, or maybe Shed cried while writing it. I opened it slowly, hands trembling. Inside, a letter, 3 pages long. The first sentence gutted me. I left him. She didn't explain much. No drama, no confessions. Just a quiet unraveling spelled out in shaky cursive. She'd moved out in the middle of the night, with 2 suitcases and a dog she'd rescued from the shelter. She'd found a job in a bookstore by the coast. Said she only spoke to 2 people a day, the owner and an old man who came in for crossword puzzles and left pennies on the counter. "I thought it would feel like freedom," she wrote. "But it just feels like losing you twice." She remembered the taste of the wine we shared, the chill in the grass. My hand flinching when she leaned in. "You didn't stop me," she said. "And that's how I knew." The letter ended with a question. If I asked you now, would the answer still be yes? Tucked inside the fold was something small, a wine-stained cork. I recognized it instantly. The one from that bottle we passed back and forth like a secret. She'd kept it. I sat there in my apartment, letter in one hand, cork in the other, and felt the weight of something I'd never let myself believe in. This wasn't a game. It never had been. It was her. Just her. Always her. I went to Maine. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't pack a lot. Just threw a few clothes in a bag and took the first flight out. I didn't even check the weather. She'd mentioned the bookstore once in her letter. A little place by the pier with a cat named Hemingway. I Googled until I found it. A crooked building with faded blue shutters and a sign that said, "See words." She was there. behind the counter, shelving used paperbacks, wearing a chunky sweater 2 sizes too big, hair tied up in a knot that kept falling apart. When she turned and saw me, she didn't gasp. She didn't smile. She just stared, like she wasn't sure I was real. I walked in slowly. The bell over the door didn't chime. The world felt still. "Hey," I said. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Then she wiped her hands on her jeans and walked toward the back. Didn't speak. Just opened a door that led into a little storage room lined with shelves and half-unpacked boxes. I followed. She closed the door behind me and kissed me. No questions. No explanations. Just hands, breath, a desperate kind of silence. We kissed like we were finishing something that had started a lifetime ago. Like we'd both been starving for the same taste and didn't know it until right then. Her hands were in my hair. Mine were on her back, holding her like she might vanish again. When we finally pulled apart, she whispered, "I almost called you 100 times. You didn't have to," I said. "I heard you anyway." She laughed quietly, then cried. Not loud, not messy, just tears falling from someone who had held too much for too long. I didn't wipe them away. I let her fall against me. Because some things don't need fixing. They just need to be held. We stayed in that back room for hours. Sometimes talking, sometimes not. Sometimes just sitting with the sound of rain tapping against the windows and the soft purr of Hemingway the cat curling between our feet. She told me everything. About the unraveling. About the nights she'd lie next to my brother and feel her heart beating in the wrong rhythm. How she'd wake up and stare at the ceiling, wondering if she'd already made the biggest mistake of her life. "I didn't leave because I was brave," she said. "I left because I couldn't lie anymore. Not to him. Not to myself." I didn't ask if she still loved him. She didn't ask if I had moved on. Some questions don't need answers when your heartbeat is speaking louder than your voice. At some point, the storm outside got louder. Wind howled through the slats of the old bookstore, and the power flickered out. We lit candles and sat on the floor, backs against a shelf of poetry. She read to me, old Neruda verses that made my chest ache. And then she said something I'll never forget. "I don't know how to undo any of it." The wedding. The silence. The pretending. "You don't have to," I said. "We just start from here." But starting isn't the same as forgetting. We both knew that. Loving her didn't erase the guilt. It didn't undo the kiss that cracked everything open or the years of pretending we were strangers. It didn't change the fact that my brother's shadow would always stretch somewhere between us. But that night, with the power out and the storm raging and her head on my shoulder, I finally felt still. Not whole, but honest. And maybe that's enough. After Maine, everything became a matter of distance. We didn't move in together. We didn't make a plan. It was too soon and too much. But we didn't let go either. She stayed on the coast. I went back to the city. We wrote letters, not emails. Real paper, ink, smudges from cups of tea, and the occasional tear stain. She always signed hers with just an initial, E. Once every few months we met. Sometimes in bookstores. Sometimes in train stations. Once, we spent a weekend in Montreal and didn't leave the hotel except to buy pastries and cheap red wine. It was messy, soft, unreal. But the truth followed us. At my brother's birthday party, I watched her face flicker on his phone screen as he showed off an old wedding photo, laughing. "She used to love these," he said, pointing to the cake I'd made. I nearly dropped my drink. That night, I got a letter. It's harder when they smile, isn't it? We knew we couldn't live like that forever. But we didn't know how to change it either. She wasn't mine, not really. And I wasn't hers. Not in the daylight, not in the way the world understands, but in the space between sleep and waking, between letters and meetings and quiet stolen moments. We belonged to the version of each other that was never spoken aloud, to the what-if that still breathed in the room after we left it. 2 years have passed since the vineyard. My brother still thinks his wedding was perfect. I see him sometimes. At family things. Birthdays. Holidays. He talks about work, the new girlfriend, some startup he might invest in. He never asks about Elle. He doesn't know she left. Or if he does, he's never said. Maybe that's how our family works. Big feelings, small silences. I haven't seen her in months. The letters stopped this past spring. No explanation. No last line. Just absence. Sometimes I check the mailbox anyway. Sometimes I write her name on the back of receipts, just to feel it. I live alone now. A tiny apartment above a bakery that smells like cinnamon every morning. I keep a copy of her favorite book beside my bed, pages dog-eared from too many late-night rereads. People ask if I'm seeing anyone. I lie. Say I'm too busy. Too picky. What I don't say is, I already did. I already loved the one who wasn't mine. The one who chose wrong, then tried to choose right too late. The one who kissed me like she was unraveling and built a whole second life on the ashes of her first. Elle. Just her. No one before or after has ever touched the part of me that she did. The part you don't talk about. The part that watches the door even when you know no one's coming. Last week, I got one final email. No subject. Just a sentence. If there's a next life, find me first. I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed, I'm already looking. And hit send.